Here's integrated 3. It's problem 11-37. And I'm turning to it right now. And it says, Eliana is still working hard on her senior project. She has recorded the sunset time for at least one day a month through December. Her graph of the data is shown at right. So it has a picture of the graph. And so we can see that it looks a little bit like a sinusoidal curve. Goes down like this. I can see that the high point is right here. Like this is one of the high points right here. And I can see that there's a low point here. So this kind of reminds me of like maybe part of a cosine graph, not the whole thing. And then it says, so that's just the month of December. Write a function that models the time the sun sets as a function of the week number, where June 1st is week number 1. So I think that we're going to take these data points that she already collected for December, and we're going to, wait, she's recorded the sunset time for at least one day a month. Oh, through December. Okay, so I think we're going to just take her graph, and we're going to model it with a sinusoid. And so here's the equation. I'm going to show you how I would get it from looking at this graph. So we know that the graphing form of a cosine or sine function is A, which is the amplitude, times cosine of B, which, well, the period is 2 pi over B. So I guess, well, anyway, B has something to do with this period. H is the horizontal shift, and K is the vertical shift. So I'm going to see if I can look at her graph and just fill in all these letters of the alphabet. Okay, so I like to usually look at try to find the amplitude first. The amplitude is how high and low the wave goes from the middle. So I see that the highest point is 11.7, and the lowest point is 3.7. So from the bottom to the very top, 11.7 minus 3.7 is 8. But I know that the midline is going to be halfway in between the top and the bottom. The amplitude is going to be 4, because from the bottom to the top all the way is 8. Half of that is 4. So that's our amplitude. So I can just plug that in right here. I'm going to use a cosine graph because we know that cosine looks a little like, more like this, and sine looks more like this. So cosine is the one that kind of goes through the point, the parent function goes through 0, 1, and that looks closer to what we have here than this one, so that's why I want to use cosine, not sine on it. So let's look at some more letters of the alphabet. We've got this B here, so I'm going to say cosine. B, I just have it memorized that the period is 2 pi over B. You can look that up in a math notes box if you want to. So I'm just going to look at my graph and try to figure out what the period is. Or maybe I won't even look at my graph to figure it out. Maybe I will look at, I'm going to think about what her graph is representing. Her graph is recording the sunset time. Oh, she recorded the sunset time for at least one day a month. So there's 12 months in the year, and they told me that I need to use week numbers, though, a function of the week number. So how many weeks are there in a year? There's 52 weeks in a year. So I'm going to want my graph to begin, or I'm going to want the period of my graph to be 52. So if I say that period equals 2 pi times b, and I plug in a 52 for the period, 52 equals 2 pi over b. 52 equals 2 pi over b, and then I just do cross products. I'm just doing algebra to find out what b equals. So you could say I multiplied both sides by b, or you could say I did cross products and I went 52b equals 2 pi times 1. Then you could divide both sides by 52, and you can get that b equals 2 pi over 52. Now I can reduce that if I want to, but your answer key left it as 2 pi over 52, so I'm just going to do the same. And then it's x minus h. So what is h? H is going to be the horizontal shift. So I know that a regular cosine, like the parent function cosine graph, the high point is at the y-axis. This one's high point is not exactly on the axis. It's shifted 4 to the right. So h must be 4. So like that. And then k is how high the graph, normally the cosine function, this is +1 and this is -1. And the midline is usually just the x-axis. But we can see that this one's midline is somewhere up. This one's midline is somewhere up in here. So what is that midline? Well, it's something a little bit less than 8. I can tell by taking the low point and adding, remember we found out that the distance between the low point and the high point was 8, so half of that distance was 4, so the amplitude is 4. So I can take the low point and add 4 to it. So it's 3.7 plus 4. 3.7 plus 4 is 7.7. So I'm going to add that in. So and then that's a good model for our graph. So a little tricky, but you just have to remember graphing form of a sinusoid, and then you have to remember that the period is 2 pi over b. You have to remember what amplitude is. You should be okay.